February's Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and we've had these webcasts started just this month to say, okay, how do we look positive? How do we go forward after abuse? What do we need to know to heal, to grow, and to rebuild our lives in a way that we never thought could ever happen before? And that's why we're talking to Yaya from Make Time to Cuddle. She's really going to dive into dating after abuse. What do we need to know? What things can we do to put in place to make sure that we're safe, but to make sure that we're also open to love and open to being able to connect with other people? Because sometimes when you've already experienced a trauma, that is so hard, just being able to open up.
Yes.
So Yaya, if you haven't been able to follow her yet, I know I've been pinging her all over the place, but make sure you do. It's Make Time to Cuddle. But Yaya really founded Make Time to Cuddle with the intent of spreading education and talking about domestic violence after being freed from over a decade of abuse. And she couldn't stand the thought of anyone being stuck in abuse without hope, and that, but also going back. And we know that that happens so often. It's such a hard cycle to break. And especially because she does have 3 young children. So we got some mommies in the house. I know you love that.
Yes.
Me too. So we love being able to talk to you about that. But after her divorce, she approached dating very hesitantly. And she not only didn't want to return to domestic violence, but she also wanted to be careful about who she brought into her children's lives. And I know if you can relate to that, please raise your hand, wave at us, give us an amen, because I think we've all been there. But through trial and error, one thing that struck me about Yaya was she has this method that she's really using to make sure that she is safe and that she's able to be open to the opportunity, but also be able to handle the loss and be able to say, this is not the right person for me. This is not a direction I want to go down because I'm smarter now than I was before. Yaya, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm just so glad we can collaborate on this because it's so needed.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So why don't you give us just a little introduction about yourself? I know that was a brief overview, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about you?
Okay, so I am, like you said, a mom of 3. I love them dearly. They really are just kind of what I revolve my life around. And that's, of course, after, you know, designating my life for God. That is where I root everything I do. And that's why this whole system that you would call for dating has come up for me. It's because the world doesn't give us good advice on it. I came out of a relationship I had been in since I was a teen. I married my high school sweetheart. And so coming into the dating world with technology now is so different, so weird. And I wasn't an avid dater before anyways. I wasn't a casual dater. I didn't really like doing anything except with people that I was just like, yes, we're going to get married. You know, it was never casual for me. So I'm just a very passionate person in everything I do. So if I have a heart for it, if I have a heart for you, no, I'm going to be passionate about you and I'm going to love you deeply. And so that's kind of probably what a lot of abuse victims can say about themselves as well, is they love deeply and they're passionate. And that's why we're preyed upon, is because we care so much.
Exactly. And those are all great traits. They're things that make us beautiful and make us who we are. But it's that switch, once a predator takes over and gets you in, you can start to get those thoughts in your head like, maybe I'm stupid or ignorant, or I don't know. I can't say what everybody else thinks, but that's really what I thought. Like, maybe I'm just a child, this hopeless romantic. And really, these are beautiful traits that God gives us to make us connected, to make us great individuals to be with. It's just, you know, trying to get over the fact that somebody preyed upon us and there's something else. There's something on the other side of that for sure. Well, I think the biggest question that everybody has is, how do you know? Like, when do you know that it's time to get back out there? Especially, you know, you're talking about having kids. Sometimes there's that, it's a single parent thing. You got to be extra careful about your children as well. It makes dating more complicated, so much more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you know?
I would say for me, when I was in counseling, and this was during my divorce, and the first thing my counselor said when he saw that the divorce was moving forward was, don't date for a year. He said, all the crazies are going to find you. And we hadn't even approached the subject of abuse at this point, but I was like, what is he even talking about? But coming out and realizing I was in an abusive relationship, I was like, oh, all the other abusers see very quickly and very easily that I was abused. And that is prime time for them to prey on you. And so it's just, okay, now I see it. So he said, not just a year from now, but a year from the date that you guys are actually divorced. So he's not talking a year from separation, a year from if you're in a dating relationship and you break up from that. It is when you make the final cut, not when you guys are going back and forth and still texting. And so it's a really final number. And so I know some, such as myself, we still have to co-parent. I have really strict boundaries surrounding that, but it's not like I'm texting him like, hey, how are you? It's here's this, this, and this, and this is what we need to do with the kids. It is never romantic. It's never approaching how he is. And so that when the conversations are like that for the co-parents, that's when you know after that divorce date and the relationship is like that, that's a year from then. And I know that's just so strange, but it's been over a year for me and I still don't date a lot because they have to jump through a lot of hoops to get on a date with me. And so, and also the loneliness factor. If you're super lonely and that's what you're looking to fill that void, no, it's okay to be alone, but you need to find contentment in that aloneness instead of just finding someone to fill that void because that's never going to work.
That is so critical too, especially, you know, the no contact survivors. You do get that period of there's nothing else there. And it's really you taking that step to say, we are done, not maybe potentially, you know, that hard cut and then just not trying to fill that void with another person is so important. Even, you know, we talk about trauma bonding a lot, but being able to say, yeah, there was a bond and it, you know, wasn't completely my fault. It's not that I'm a bad person because I was bonded to the person I love. That's never a bad thing, but it is when the other person isn't meeting those expectations, isn't serving what they're supposed to be. So don't try to fill that void for sure, for sure. So I know you said you're not dating a lot. You're not, you know, constantly out there, which is in itself probably the best thing to be able to say, hey, look, I probably am on the right path here. But what are the first things you do before you begin to date again? What steps should we be taking?
Mine is to be comfortable in my aloneness. When I'm feeling like, hey, I really feel like I need somebody to make me feel like something, that's usually a warning sign in me that I'm going to attract the wrong people, first of all, because they see that vulnerability. Even if we don't see it ourselves, other people can see that in us in the way that we approach them and have conversations, our body language, and all of that. And then we have to remember we have a real enemy that does come against us. And so it's him working in and out. And he knows very much how we feel because he can sense it and he sees what's going on in our lives. So I would say when I'm just alone but content in that, that's an okay step for me to be ready to identify that and go dating again. But it's learning your own likes and dislikes, because for me, I adapted all of my abusers' likes and dislikes. I was listening to, I don't know, like screamo bands, and there's nothing against that. If you like that, great. But then I came out and realized that music actually triggers me now. And so it's like, oh, I never liked that. It just reminded me of something I was familiar with. And so it's learning, what do I like to do? Who am I? How do I like to dress? And it's just relearning who you are as a person. And that for me changed a lot, going from being 16 and dating him to now being 30. And I've been divorced a few years, and it's taken a lot of trial and error to see what's my style now. What do I like for music? What do I like to do for fun? Because when people ask me that, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I
have babies.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would say is just keep growing your relationship with God. Because it's more likely that you will attract the good and you will fend off the bad.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Especially talking about knowing yourself. When we say we have to set boundaries the next time around, and they're hard boundaries. This is probably a good maybe if they don't convince me otherwise, right?
Right.
But being able to know yourself, if you don't know yourself, how do you know where to put those boundaries?
Right.
I think that's really important for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So you talked about hoops. They got to jump through some hoops before they go on a date with you. What are these hoops? How are they helpful? I think we all need some more hoops.
I think we all do, because I think for me, especially when somebody says something, I'm like, oh, that's so good. And then all my guard is down and I'm like, I love you. You know, no, I haven't done that again yet, but that's just how I am as a person. Like I said, I'm super passionate. So part of that is being unapologetic for who God's made you to be. I find often I was, again, compromising myself and, you know, dwelling with his likes and dislikes and not knowing mine. So it's, who did God make you to be? What are your passions? And if they have a problem with those and they're trying to change those, nope, sorry, bye. If they can't even up front like what you like, or even want to go where you want to go, it doesn't have to be everybody has the same similarities. We can be opposites, but it's how do they welcome that? Or are they trying to change it and push it away? And I'm going to tell a quick story about an almost date I had. I had a really great friend set me up with, it was a friend of hers, husband's best friend. So it's kind of like she knew this guy in passing, but didn't know him well. And so I was like, okay, I can try and get out there and date him. So we were able to text for about a week leading up to the date. And he was quick to be like, you know, what are your deal breakers? Which I loved because I like just getting right into it. So I told him, you know, no sex before marriage. And I'm trying to remember the other ones. Oh, you got to put Christ first, and basically everything else should fall into place. And then I said, and if you ever get to meet my kids, you guys have to get along. Like, I would hope you'd like them. And so he was like, yeah, no problem. That's fine. Well, I have a really good friend, another friend who runs a purity ministry, and she believes against kissing before marriage. And I was like, I'm not sold on that. So I texted her before. I was like, I want to do what's right. I don't want him kissing me on the first date if I don't want him to, but how do I approach that beforehand without making it awkward, like denying him as he comes in, you know? So she was talking about the brain chemistry and how it changes, and that always sells me. If you tell me my brain changes by doing something, I'm like, okay, that's a big deal. God's showing us through science that something is meant to be there for a reason. And I'm not saying don't kiss anybody ever. It's everybody's own convictions, right? And so I ended up being sold on her idea and just texting him and saying, hey, what if we don't kiss until we get to know each other a little bit? I didn't even say until marriage. Guy flipped out on me, went crazy. And what that taught me was he couldn't even have a conversation about something. I wasn't saying we have to do this. I said, what about? Like, let's talk about this. Secondly, it showed that he really had no respect for me because he could do the no sex before marriage. But when I said no kissing, that took away his gateway into pushing my boundaries. And so it triggered me. It made me cry because he was attacking my character. But then he turned around and started blaming me. Oh, you're going to be the victim. Oh, you're not serious. And those are really bad things for a person to say, especially when you've never met in person and you've only been talking for a week. And so it was just really, it makes me laugh now because I'm like, wow, he was really trying to get in and just change my whole life around. And all I had to say is, let's talk about not kissing and bye. It was as easy as that for me. And so that might not work with everybody because some people are more patient. Some abusers are. Some are more tolerant in finding ways around your boundaries. You know, so it was just a really good protection for me. And the fact that I had those friends surrounding me that I could talk about it with and say, hey, filter this guy with me. Go stalk him on social media. And then my last thing on that is to go forward in your worship and your beliefs and your relationship with God, showing them your true self. And they'll go running if they see how passionate you are about God. If they're abusive, they'll see that you'll read right through them because God will give you that wisdom and discernment if you're walking with him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Can you think that you can just ask a couple questions that automatically just trigger them to show those true colors? If we could have all been able to do that earlier on in our past relationships, we'd be having completely different discussions. We wouldn't have nonprofits. So
right.
I guess we'd probably be bored. I know. I don't know what we would be doing.
I know.
Oh man. Do you have any other advice, any other things that you can identify quickly to help tell if somebody's the wrong person for you?
Well, and just that in between of opening your heart up, but still guarding it. You know, the Bible talks about it. I have right here, Matthew 7:6. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces. And then Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life. I believe fully in those passages, but with that, we need to be vulnerable and kind of put some things out there so that we can get a read on their reactions of our passions, you know, because they will have it. And sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, that's great. But keep digging into it. If you see that they brush it off or are trying to push it down, when somebody's trying to change, especially your relationship with God, family, other things like that, or when they're questioning things in a non-respectful way, again, those boundary pushing things, they do it very subtly. And so you really have to be prayed up before your dates. That's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And see how he leads. You know, if he's not even willing to lead on a first date, I'm old fashioned. And so I'm not saying he always has to pay or he always has to get the door. I appreciate that personally, but my ex-abuser did that. So
Mm-hmm.
we got to read every action and we have to run it through the filter of God.
Absolutely. Especially the passage just on that breaking you into pieces. They have to get close to be able to do that. They have to get your guard down, and we do have to be vulnerable. Otherwise we don't have deep relationships with one another. And that's sort of why I love the ministry that you have, is because people are on there and we're close and we're all vulnerable with one another in this safe place where we can say, okay, look, we all have this common denominator that is terrible, but we're all heading this way.
Yes.
Like, we're not stuck here. And it helps put those pieces back together for sure. Right. I love that. But yeah, and it's hard too, because I think sometimes we don't think of the isolation and the fact that isolation from God.
Yeah.
They have to remove that. Otherwise, if you're sitting there and you have a relationship with God and you understand that God's telling you, you are so important to him. And this person's trying to tell you you're not important to anyone. The only person you're important to is me, and only in the way that I tell you that you're important and how you should act, behave, and coincide in my life. Because you're really just a player in their life. Right. It's not, you know, you're a part of their life. You are just a player in that game, for sure.
Agreed.
Awesome. Yeah. I want to make sure we always do this. We always have this like quick 1-minute strategy. What if all anyone remembers from this is just this 1 minute? What strategy do they need to take away in learning to date after abuse?
I'd say taking that time, using that year, and combining it with getting closer to God and healing and finding out what you like and dislike. I mean, it's so important to know who you are in God, and he'll show you how he made you special. And then on top of that, it's being contentment when you are alone. There will be loneliness, but there are other relationships to fill those gaps, that you don't have to always be lonely, even when you are not in a relationship that's romantic. It's okay. And then just always remember to be bold and take it slow.
I love that. I love that. I usually ask for a reminder, but I think that's perfect. Be bold and take it slow. That is awesome. You know what? You're getting so much love. I love it.
I love it.
For commenting.
I love
you don't
it.
know how weird it is. Sometimes we'll sit here and we'll just talk to each other, and you know, we never forget you're there. But if you're quiet, we never know what you're thinking too.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Well, awesome. Thank you everyone for being with us. If you have not done it already, go follow Yaya at Make Time to Cuddle. They have amazing things going on Instagram. Plus, you get to see the cuties that she has created, that she protects and loves forever. And we all love them too. I just love everybody's baby stuff.
I know, me too.
Like the kiddos.
It's the best.
Yeah. Awesome. And if you haven't already, make sure you find us on Facebook too. We have a support group that's Domestic Violence Healing, not just a support group. If you search it in Facebook, Domestic Violence Healing and Support Group, and it'll say Remindher movement on it. But it's all about a lot of what we're talking about here. What are those positive next steps we can take to continue to move forward, to rebuild a beautiful life that we could have never imagined if we would have stayed? There is so much more after abuse, if we're willing to chase it, if we're willing to get out there, get uncomfortable, be a little vulnerable,